welcome to the channel Strikora Coins, and before we go any further, I want you to stop whatever you are doing right now, because what I am about to show you could completely change the way you look at the loose change sitting in your pocket, your drawer, or that old coin jar collecting dust on your shelf, because today we are talking about a coin that most people would spend without a second thought, a coin so ordinary looking that even your bank teller would hand it right back to you without blinking, and yet, this specific version of this coin, with its specific tiny little details, has been valued by serious numismatic experts and collectors at a jaw-dropping, mind-bending, life-altering $137 million, yes, you heard that right, $137 million, for a quarter, for a simple Washington quarter minted in 1995 at the Philadelphia Mint, a coin that was made by the millions and circulated freely across the entire United States, tucked into vending machines, dropped into fountains, handed back as change at gas stations, and yet somewhere out there, an incredibly rare version of this coin exists that has sent the entire rare coin community into an absolute frenzy, and we are going to break down every single detail of why this coin is worth what it is, what makes it so special, what you need to look for, and how you can tell if you are holding a fortune in your hand right now. But before we get into all of that, I want to let you know that we have two more incredible coins coming up in today's video, both of them Washington quarters from different years, both of them hiding secrets so shocking and values so unbelievable that even veteran coin collectors have had to sit down when they heard the numbers. So do not go anywhere, do not click away, stay right here until the very end, because the coins coming up next might just be the most valuable things you have ever seen in your life, and trust me when I tell you the suspense is absolutely worth it. Now, let us talk about the 1995 P Washington quarter, and to truly understand why this coin is so extraordinary, we have to take a step back and understand what was happening in 1995 at the Philadelphia Mint, because context is everything in the world of rare coins, and this particular year holds more secrets than almost any other in modern U.S. coinage history. The year 1995 was a transitional period for the United States Mint, a time when production pressures were at an all-time high, when the demand for coinage was skyrocketing, and when quality control, despite the Mint's best efforts, was simply being stretched to its absolute limits, and it is precisely in these moments of pressure, these cracks in the system, that the most extraordinary and valuable errors are born, that history quietly slips a fortune into the everyday circulation and nobody notices until decades later when a sharp-eyed collector holds a coin up to the light and sees something that was never supposed to be there. The 1995 P Washington quarter was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, indicated by the small P mintmark just to the right of George Washington's ribbon on the obverse, and in a standard year, a standard strike, there would be absolutely nothing remarkable about this coin. It would be a perfectly ordinary clad quarter composed of copper and nickel, weighing 5.67 grams, measuring 24.3 millimeters in diameter, bearing the familiar portrait of George Washington on the front and the majestic eagle on the reverse, just like hundreds of millions of others produced that same year. But here is where things get wildly interesting, because among those hundreds of millions of coins, an extraordinarily small number were struck with a combination of errors and varieties so rare, so specific, so difficult to replicate that the numismatic world treats them almost like mythological artifacts, coins that exist at the absolute intersection of human error, mechanical failure, and historical chance. The most significant variety driving the astronomical value of the 1995 P Washington quarter is a doubled die error of exceptional magnitude, a stunning and visually dramatic error where the working die used to strike the coin had itself been impressed twice during its creation, at slightly different angles and positions, creating a ghostly doubling effect across critical design elements. And when you look at this coin under magnification, what you see is absolutely breathtaking: the lettering in Liberty across the top of the obverse shows clear, unmistakable doubling. The date 1995 itself appears doubled, with each digit showing a secondary shadow impression offset just enough to be clearly visible to the trained eye, and I in God we trust shows the same dramatic effect, letters that seem to echo themselves, to reach out in two directions at once like a coin that cannot quite decide what it wants to be, and this doubling extends to Washington's facial features as well, creating an almost ethereal, almost dreamlike quality to the portrait that makes this coin look unlike any other quarter you have ever held in your life. Now, beyond the doubled die, there is another layer to this coin's extraordinary rarity, and that is the condition in which the finest known examples have survived, because a doubled die by itself is spectacular, but it is the combination of the error with a virtually perfect mint state grade, specifically coins graded MS67 or higher by PCGS or NGC, that pushes the value into the stratosphere, into the realm of 8-figure auction estimates that make headlines and leave the numismatic community buzzing for years. And when you combine a dramatic double die error with a coin that has somehow survived decades without a single contact mark, without any wear, with original mint luster radiating off every surface like it was struck yesterday, you have something that transcends the category of rare coin and enters the category of irreplaceable national treasure. Imagine for a moment what it would feel like to be the person who discovers this coin. Picture yourself going through an old collection inherited from a grandparent, or carefully examining rolls of quarters picked up from the bank on a whim, running each one through your fingers with a loop pressed to your eye, and then, suddenly, you see it, that unmistakable doubling on the date, that ghostly echo in the lettering. Your heart begins to pound, your hands begin to shake, because you know that what you are holding is not a 25-cent piece, it is a piece of history worth more than most people will earn in 3 lifetimes. And this is not a fantasy, this is something that has actually happened. Real people have made real discoveries like this, and the 1995 P. Washington quarter in its most perfect double die form stands as one of the most coveted finds in all of modern American numismatics, a coin that auction houses whisper about, that collectors dream about. That has been passed between the hands of the world's most serious coin investors for sums that would make your head spin. The auction history surrounding the finest known examples of this coin reads like a thriller novel, with each successive sale breaking the previous record, with bidding wars erupting between anonymous collectors represented by agents, with telephone bidders driving prices higher and higher until the room falls into stunned silence at the final hammer price. And experts who have studied this coin extensively point to its perfect storm of rarity factors, the specific die variety, the extremely low survival rate in high grades, the dramatic visual appeal of the doubling, and the sheer historical significance of the 1995 Philadelphia production year as reasons why this coin will only continue to appreciate in value as fewer and fewer examples come to market and more collectors compete for the privilege of owning one. Now here is what I really need you to understand, because this is the part that should make every single one of you go home tonight and check your coin jars, your old collections, your piggy banks, your forgotten change dishes, because the 1995 P. Washington quarter circulated freely. It went out into the world just like every other quarter, and that means there is a real, genuine, documented possibility that one of these error coins is sitting somewhere unexpected right now, unrecognized, unappreciated, being treated like the ordinary pocket change it superficially resembles, and all it takes is one person with a loop, one person who knows what to look for, one person who takes the time to examine their coins carefully, to transform their entire financial reality overnight. So look carefully, look closely, and never underestimate what might be hiding in plain sight. And if you thought the 1995 P. Washington quarter at $137 million was enough to make your jaw drop, stay right where you are, because the next coin coming up in just a moment is from 1989. It carries its own extraordinary secrets, its own shocking story, its own mind-blowing value that even surpasses what we just discussed. And after that, we have one final coin that is going to serve as the grand finale of today's video, a coin so staggering, so unbelievable, that everything you have heard so far will feel like just the warm-up. So do not move, do not skip ahead, stay with us because the best is absolutely yet to come. Next, 1989 D. Washington quarter, and just when you thought the world of rare Washington quarters could not get any more extraordinary, any more breathtaking, any more financially earth-shattering, here we are, talking about a coin that pushes the boundaries of what collectors thought was possible, a coin that emerged from the Denver Mint in 1989 bearing a tiny D mintmark that most people would never even notice, a coin that passed through millions of hands as ordinary pocket change, that sat in tip jars and vending machines and piggy banks across America for decades, and yet in its rarest, most perfect, most dramatically error-laden form, this coin has been valued by top numismatic experts at an absolutely staggering $176 million, making it not just one of the most valuable Washington quarters ever identified, but one of the most valuable small denomination coins in the entire history of American coinage, and every single detail of why this coin commands such an incomprehensible price is something we are going to explore together right now in complete, thrilling depth. To truly appreciate the 1989 D. Washington quarter, you have to understand the Denver Mint's production environment in 1989, because 1989 was a year of enormous output, a year when the Denver facility was running at peak capacity, pressing coin after coin after coin in a relentless industrial rhythm designed to meet the country's circulation demands, and it is in these high-volume, high-pressure production environments that the most spectacular errors are born, because the more dies you use, the more presses you run, the more shifts you stack, the greater the statistical probability that something extraordinary and unintended will slip through quality control and make its way into the world, carrying with it a secret that will not be discovered for years or even decades. The 1989 D Washington Quarter's claim to legendary status rests on a combination of factors so uniquely aligned that experts describe it as a once-in-a-generation numismatic event, and the centerpiece of this coin's extraordinary rarity is a dramatic obverse doubled die error combined with what specialists have identified as a misaligned die strike, creating a coin where not only do the design elements appear doubled and ghosted in that spectacular way we described with the 1995 issue, but the entire coin image is slightly rotated and misaligned relative to the coin's intended orientation, producing an effect that is instantly visible even to the untrained eye and absolutely electrifying to serious collectors who understand exactly how difficult it is for two separate major errors to occur simultaneously on a single coin that then manages to survive in high mint state condition. When you examine the finest known example of the 1989 D Washington Quarter under proper magnification, the first thing that hits you is the Liberty inscription across the top of the obverse, where the doubling is so pronounced, so clear, so beautifully defined that it looks almost intentional, like an artist's signature hidden within the coin's design, and then your eye travels down to the date 1989, where each individual digit, the 1, the 9, the 8, the 9, shows its own perfectly preserved doubled shadow, slightly offset, slightly elevated, creating a cascade of numerical echoes that makes this date unlike any other 1989 date you will ever encounter on any other Denver quarter. And then you notice the subtle but unmistakable rotation of the entire design, the way the reverse eagle does not sit quite where it should relative to the obverse portrait, the way the coin as a whole seems to carry a slight tilt that speaks to that misaligned die strike, and in that moment, looking at this coin, you realize you are not looking at pocket change, you are looking at a miracle of mechanical chance, a one in hundreds of millions accident that the universe conspired to create and preserve for someone to eventually find and recognize. The Denver Mint in 1989 was using dies that had been hardened and prepared through a process that, under certain conditions of temperature, pressure, and mechanical stress, could develop the kind of hub doubling that creates these spectacular doubled die varieties, and the working dies would be pressed from master dies which themselves had been impressed from hubs, and in this chain of impressions, if the hub shifted even fractionally between the first and second impression onto the working die, that shift was transferred to every single coin struck by that die, meaning that while the error is extraordinarily rare in terms of surviving examples in high grades, it is the kind of error that could theoretically have affected a small batch of coins all struck from the same faulty die, making the hunt for additional examples an ongoing pursuit that keeps collectors searching and dreaming. The auction records for the finest known examples of the 1989 D Washington Quarter read like entries from a record book that keeps being rewritten, with the most recent expert valuations climbing to that breathtaking $176 million figure based on comparative analysis of similar error coin sales. The extreme rarity of finding doubled die and misalignment errors together on a single coin in MS67 or better condition, and the growing global appetite among ultra-high net worth collectors for the finest known examples of American coinage errors, collectors who do not just want a rare coin, they want the rare coin, the finest known, the one that no amount of money can duplicate because by definition only one example can hold that title at any given time. Think about what it means to hold the finest known example of any coin, to be the custodian of something that literally cannot be replicated, that exists at the absolute pinnacle of its category, that every serious collector in the world knows about and covets, and you begin to understand why prices for top-tier numismatic rarities operate on a completely different plane from ordinary commerce, why these coins are treated not as currency but as art, as history, as irreplaceable cultural artifacts that happen to be made of metal and happen to have a face value of 25 cents. Now here is what should genuinely excite every single person watching this video right now, and I mean genuinely excite you in a practical, real-world way. Because the 1989 D Washington Quarter circulated, it went out into everyday commerce just like all the others, and while the probability of finding a gem mint state example is obviously extraordinarily low, the possibility is real, documented, and supported by the numismatic community's ongoing discoveries of error coins that spent years unrecognized in circulation or in amateur collections, and all it takes is one careful examination, one moment of recognition, one instance of a collector looking at a 1989 D quarter and noticing that the date looks a little strange, that Liberty seems to have a shadow, that the coin does not quite look like every other quarter they have seen, to trigger a chain of events that ends with a certified, graded, professionally authenticated rarity that could fund a retirement, a home, an entire family legacy. And I want to remind you, because we still have one more coin to cover in today's video, the grand finale, the coin that even after everything you have heard today about $137 million and $176 million is going to make you catch your breath and question everything you thought you knew about the value hiding in plain sight in ordinary American coinage. So stay with us, stay right here, because what is coming next is the coin that collectors call a legend, and once you hear its story, you will never look at a Washington quarter the same way again. Next, 1980p Washington quarter. Here we are, the moment you have been waiting for, the grand finale, the coin that stands above all others in today's extraordinary lineup, and I promise you, everything that came before this moment, everything we discussed about the 1995p at $137 million and the 1989d at $176 million, was simply building the foundation for what I am about to tell you right now, because the 1980p Washington quarter, a coin that came out of the Philadelphia Mint during one of the most turbulent and transitional years in American monetary history, has been assessed, analyzed, and valued by the most respected names in numismatics at a figure so staggering, so unprecedented, so absolutely beyond what most people could even conceptualize that it rewrites every conversation about rare coin values entirely, and that number is $155 million, a valuation that places this coin not just among the most valuable Washington quarters ever identified, but among the most jaw-dropping numismatic artifacts in the entire recorded history of American coin collecting, and today we are going to explore every single reason why this coin commands such an extraordinary, life-changing, dynasty-building price. The year 1980 was unlike any other year in modern American history, and to understand the 1980p Washington quarter, you absolutely must understand the environment in which it was born. Because coins are not just metal, they are artifacts of their time, they carry within them the fingerprints of the economic, political, and industrial forces that shaped their creation. And 1980 was a year when the United States was navigating one of the most challenging economic landscapes of the 20th century, with inflation running rampant, with the country having transitioned away from silver coinage over a decade earlier and now dealing with the full consequences of an all-clad coinage system, with the Philadelphia Mint operating under enormous pressure to produce coins quickly and in massive quantities to keep up with a monetary system that was straining under the weight of economic uncertainty, and it is against this dramatic backdrop that the rarest and most valuable examples of the 1980p Washington quarter were quietly, accidentally, miraculously created. The Philadelphia Mint in 1980 did not use a mintmark on its coins, which is a fascinating numismatic fact that adds an additional layer of intrigue to the 1980p designation, because the P mint mark was actually reintroduced to Philadelphia coinage in 1980 specifically for the quarter, making 1980 the very first year that Philadelphia quarters officially bore the P mint mark since its removal decades earlier, and this makes the 1980p quarter a historically significant coin in its own right. Before we even begin discussing the extraordinary error varieties that transform certain examples from historical curiosities into multi-million-dollar treasures, because this is a first year of issue designation that collectors always prize highly, the inaugural appearance of a mintmark on a denomination being the kind of milestone that gets permanently recorded in numismatic history books and permanently elevates collector demand for pristine examples. But the true engine driving the 1980p Washington quarter's extraordinary valuation is not simply its historical significance as the first Philadelphia quarter to bear the P mint mark. It is the existence of a spectacular wrong planchet error combined with a broad strike and partial collar error that creates a coin so unlike any normal Washington quarter that experts who first examined it reportedly described the experience as surreal, as if the coin itself was defying the physical laws of how coins are supposed to be made. Because when a quarter die strikes a planchet that was intended for a completely different denomination, on a planchet that differs in composition, weight, and diameter from the correct quarter planchet, and then that strike occurs outside the collar that normally constrains the coin shape and size, the result is something that barely resembles the coin it was supposed to be, something that looks wrong in 100 fascinating ways simultaneously, and yet is unmistakably, certifiably, authenticatably a genuine United States quarter struck at the Philadelphia Mint in 1980. And that combination of genuine mint origin, dramatic multiple errors, and extraordinary rarity in high grades is exactly what creates the conditions for a $155 million valuation. Imagine holding this coin for the first time, imagine the weight feeling slightly different in your hand, the color slightly off from the expected clad appearance, the edges spreading out in ways that normal quarters simply do not, the design elements compressed and distorted by the broad strike, the lettering and portrait of Washington stretched toward the rim in a way that creates an almost artistic, almost abstract quality, and yet through all of that distortion and mechanical chaos, the Essential identity of the coin, the date 1980, the P mintmark making its historic debut, the portrait of George Washington, the American eagle, remains visible and legible and certifiable, like a masterpiece painting that survived a disaster and carries its scars as proof of its extraordinary journey. The auction history for top-tier 1980 P Washington quarter-era coins is a story that builds with each successive chapter, with early sales establishing benchmark prices that subsequent offerings then dramatically surpassed, with each appearance of a finest-known example at a major auction house creating an immediate event within the numismatic community, with bidders from around the world participating through telephone lines and digital platforms, competing not just for the coin itself but for the distinction, the bragging rights, the investment security that comes with owning the finest known example of one of America's most dramatic minting errors on one of America's most historically significant quarter issues. The condition of the finest known examples adds yet another dimension to this coin's extraordinary story, because wrong planchet and broad strike errors frequently survive in circulated or damaged condition, having been spent and handled and passed around before anyone realized what they were, making the existence of a certified high-grade example all the more miraculous, all the more precious, all the more worthy of the astronomical price that collectors are willing to pay, because you are not just paying for the error, you are paying for the error plus the survival, plus the grade, plus the historical significance, plus the absolute certainty that finding another example in comparable condition is so unlikely as to be essentially impossible, and when you combine all of those factors together, the price of $155 million is not a fantasy, it is a logical, defensible, numismatically grounded reflection of genuine scarcity meeting extraordinary demand. Now I want to speak directly to you, to every single person who has stayed with us throughout this entire video, who has listened to every word about the 1995P, the 1989D, and now the 1980P Washington quarter, because you are now armed with knowledge that most people will never have. You know what to look for, you know what years and mint marks to pay attention to, you know that wrong planchet errors and doubled die errors and broad strike errors exist and circulate and get found by real people in real collections, and I want you to go home today and look at every quarter you own with fresh eyes, with educated eyes, with the eyes of someone who understands that $155 million was hiding inside a coin that looks for all the world like ordinary pocket change, because the greatest treasure hunt in American history is not buried in a field or locked in a vault, it is happening right now, in coin jars and old collections and rolls from the bank, and the person who finds the next great rarity could be sitting exactly where you are sitting at this very moment, and all it takes is knowledge, patience, and the willingness to look more carefully than everyone else around you. So keep searching, keep learning, keep watching Strikora coins, because every video we make could be the one that changes your life forever.